Our annual Bike of the Year test is over for 2025 with the results in, and in our last vodcast we discussed the winners from this year's test, how we got there, how the test was run, all that kind of stuff. In this episode we're going to be talking through the sort of wider context of where we're at in the cycling tech market now, how these two wonderful gentlemen did their testing, and generally reflections on bike tech as a whole in 2025. But before we get on to that, I want to tell you about the Auto Trail and its Expedition 68 camper van. This year's Bike of the Year couldn't have been possible without the support of Auto Trail, the UK's leading motorhome and camper van manufacturer. Auto Trail has more than 40 years of experience pushing boundaries, embracing cutting-edge technologies and designing solutions to enhance the van life experience. And the good news for you as a rider, Auto Trail's Expedition 68 range is designed with cyclists front of mind. The range includes 3 models, all with an integrated bike garage and pull-out bike trays. It's a no-compromise camper van for cyclists who want to head out onto the open road to explore new terrain with convenience and in comfort. With a 140 brake horsepower engine as standard, a 200-watt solar panel setup, a 75 amp-hour leisure battery, and a pop-top roof option, the Expedition 68 is designed to unleash your sense of adventure. Head to autotrail.co.uk for more information or click the link in the description. Thank you again to Auto Trail for sponsoring this year's Bike of the Year test. Now, back to the video. Warren Rossiter, we're going to start with you.
Okay.
And the talking point I think that's most intriguing out of this year's Bike of the Year test is how much tech integration has moved forward. No better exemplified than in this Cannondale Synapse.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we've seen emerge over recent years, you know, right from like second generation Shimano Di2, provided you got the additional Bluetooth antenna, SRAM ETAP, and then Axis. We've seen that drivetrains now being electronic controlled can provide data, you know, so a modern electronic drivetrain, you can find out what gear you're in, you can see your cadence if you're pairing it with a heart rate monitor and a power meter, you can cross-reference all of those things, and then post-ride you can analyze all that data, see how much time you spend in each individual gear, you know, reference that against everything. I mean, like, incredible kind of analysis and training tool. And I, you know, absolutely love that, and that's what you get here, you know, with the Synapse with its Axis group set. But then the Synapse has brought in extra elements. You know, you've got the fairly long-standing Cannondale speed sensor mounted on the front wheel. That gives you a more accurate data than GPS for speed. But then we've got the smart sense integration. So we've got integrated lights and integrated rear radar, one central battery powering everything. You know, it's bringing all this tech in that enhances your ride. It's not taking anything away. It's just improving everything. Electronic drivetrains are better, more accurate, stay more accurate for longer. You've got the safety elements of daytime running lights and nighttime lights and the rear radar. All these things aren't taken away from what makes a bike wonderful thing. It's just enhancing it. It enhances your post-ride experience. It enhances your, you know, the elements you can use for training. But most importantly, it's a safer thing to ride. And I think groundbreaking bikes like this, and, you know, the previous generation, which wasn't quite so successful, are just showing them where the road bike, gravel bike, any bike, basically experience should go. You know, obviously integration is coming in a big way on e-bikes. Very interesting thing to introduce. You know, most modern e-bike systems at the minute, I've got an urban Specialized. It's got a fantastic, you know, built-in computer. Gives me so much data. You know, even gives you like the balance of how much power you're putting in, how much power it's putting in, and how that affects your range and all these sorts of things. And I think all these things that are bringing an extra added element of usability are just, you know, I think that's where bikes need to go.
Cannondale's not alone in this regard as well. I think key notable launch in this space has also been the Canyon Eclipse system. It's a slightly different kind of proposition. It's a dynamo powered lighting system primarily with USB charging, but crucially with this bike and also the Canyon, it is so much more neater and far less DIY than previous solutions.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the main reasons I like this Smart Sense setup, because, you know, in my 40 plus years of riding, not once have I got to winter and been able to find the bracket or, you know, the little rubber wrap that I need so it fits my bars on any light, or like, you know, that I've got one light but a different bracket, and I've got, and because you never put everything away properly. I'm not that organised.
You're speaking to the
Yeah, so it's pretty much every year it's like, oh, I need to buy a new light because I can't find a bracket for this one, or they don't make it anymore, or etc. etc. Having this all integrated in one thing, and I've only got one single battery to worry about, that charges everything. So I get back from a ride, pop open the little storage thing, pull the battery, take it inside, plug it in.
What does the battery look like, incidentally? What is it like? It's not an E-Type battery, obviously.
No, it's, we can show. That's it.
Oh, intriguing.
And that powers the lights, the radar, and the access system.
I think one of the things that's interesting with this, and I'm not going to dwell on it too much because I don't fully understand, but clearly this relies on SRAM, given it powers the drivetrain to kind of create an open system, if you like, an open system to actually power their drivetrains. I feel like it was quite a closed shop for a long time for kind of SRAM, but then on Shimano as well, things have improved a bit there where you can now power classified. I feel like behind the scenes, the stuff we're never going to be concerned with, but the protocols, which links all this stuff up, is clearly more open-minded than it previously was.
I think that's where it's got to go. I mean, we are seeing, for years, I think probably all of us have written op-eds about why are there so many standards? Why can't everything just be one singular thing? But now I actually think we're sort of getting there. Integrated cable systems are kind of converging together, that even if they are called something slightly different, they are sort of compatible with each other. With bottom brackets, everybody just seems to be going back to threaded, without exception. And so we are seeing a convergence on standards, which is a good thing. And I think on electronics it needs to be the same.
And plenty more to come in this space. I definitely think that's going to be a talking point in next year's Bike of the Year when we talk about electronic integration. We have no kind of hint as to what's to come, but as we speculated in the last vodcast, I think you're right. I think there will be big names coming to market with similar endurance bikes or whatever, where it kind of makes sense to launch it initially with a bit more tech integrated. Ash, on a different subject, your view is that, actually, I'm going to rephrase that. Your view, having approached this test, is that the sort of aero bike was the key one to focus on, primarily because the all-rounder is converging in a little way. Give me your take.
Well, I'd say it's all converging together, really. What we're going to see, I think, going forward, we're going to see less of the pure aero bike, all-rounder and lightweight race bikes. And we're almost going to lose that kind of, it would just be a race bike, which is kind of an all-rounder, but really these days, these latest aero bikes are now, practically as good as an all-rounder or a lightweight bike in terms of ride anyway, really. So we're just going to have those race bikes, which are just sort of go fast to the exclusion of everything else, albeit they're fairly well-rounded now as well. And then we're going to have this kind of road bike segment that will appear. Now, we call all bikes road bikes, right? If they're not gravel, they're on the roadside. We call them all road bikes. But in fact, that would suddenly be the road bikes are the ones that people will buy. And then your race bikes are the ones that are just, cutting edge, include all the latest aerodynamics and, ceramic speed technology, ceramics technology. It's not just ceramic speed that makes ceramic components, of course. And I just think the way we categorize race bikes is going to change, in that it will be race bikes and road bikes rather than sort of aero race bikes, lightweight race bikes, all-rounder race bikes, and then endurance bikes that sort of prop them up because they sell a lot more volume. So I just think the way we categorize race bikes will change.
I think there's clearly more nuance on the women's Pro Tour side, where we saw in the Tour de France Femme there was more variation in the bikes that were being raced. On the men's side, it was much more clear-cut aero wins all round. So from a consumer perspective, though, do you think there's any place for the lightweight climbing bike in the future? Bearing in mind that there is something very appealing about lifting a bike up and going oh, that's very light.
That's very light. Yes, I do. I think there's going to be an enduring appeal, but I think that we won't call it a lightweight climbing bike. We'll just call it a lightweight road bike.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of think on that score, if we take, there have been some flags that have been put up, over recent years. If you think back to when, Specialized had the Venge Vitus, and they said, right, we're dropping that, and we're smashing it into the tarmac and making the tarmac more aero. And then that generation of tarmac wasn't as light as the previous generation, or wasn't as aero as the Venge. So I wonder what the next tarmac's going to be. I don't think they're going to bring Venge back, but I think tarmac's going to get more aero.
And then the kind of crux kind of fulfills, not the crux, sorry, the ethos
ethos.
fulfills.
That's exactly my point. We will have these bikes which aren't destined to be raced. And, Colnago with the Y1 RS and, the V5, they're both fairly aero. Well, the Y1 is very, very aero. The V5 is still very aero compared to bikes of old. But then they've got the C series, the beautiful handcrafted made in Italy bikes. That's where you fulfill your lightweight, quota.
It's an interesting take. I don't necessarily disagree. I think, if someone is serious about racing, they're probably serious about aero.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we have the endurance bikes of this world, which fulfill a very different category for many people. But I'm not going to say niche, but they're not, I don't know, they're not going to capture imagination the same way that a super lightweight bike might do.
Yeah, like the Orbea Orca is a really good example where they...
Such a good looking
It was
bike.
a great
Very
looking
classic.
bike, and was actually was a cover bike for our Cycling Plus magazine a few months ago, and it's a great bike. It's it handles like a race bike. It's but like with some sensibility in there. It's not focused around aero, but it's that kind of like lightweight road bike that most people would sort of covet owning because it's really polished, really polished, really smooth looking, great looking bike, and with all its round tubes. The Scott Addict RC is kind of very close to that, which did was earned a highly commended this year for Botti, and I just think we're gonna, instead of just having these micro categories of race bikes, I think that because the aero bike and the all-rounder are going to merge into one. Like this is your all-round race bike. Thanks very much. Whatever you want to call it, aero race bike, all-round race bike, and then you'll have your just general sort of racy road bike as well, and so it'll just condense down.
Making things clearer than ever for consumers.
Yeah, because at the moment the Venn diagrams are so overlapping.
The thing with it is with the aero road bike is fun, great, exciting bikes to ride, but unlike having a really nice, beautiful, skinny tube, lightweight bike, you can't go out for a little bit of a poodle and a cruise on an aero bike.
Coffee runs are not a thing.
I think
you've got to be on it. You look at that bike and go, that is a weapon built to go fast. So if I get on that bike, I've got to go fast. Whereas if you've got a nice sort of, I think about my own, my old rim brake Party Z0 or even my Super 6 Evo.
Or your TCR.
Or my TCR, yeah. I can just go and have a nice casual Sunday cafe run on that. And not feel ridiculous.
I remember Aero Watts Bromley, who is pretty uncompromising in his pursuit of aeroness. Even he said of the Rebel Ultra, that is quite an extreme example, but it is a true aero bike. You would imagine it's the sort of thing he gravitates towards. He's like, no, I wouldn't that would never be my one and only bike. It's just simply too aggressive.
Yeah, I'd say there are a couple of other good examples in recent times, like Ridley Falcon RS, the BMC Team Machine R as well. They're very businesslike at the front end. You sit on them, you get onto the cockpit, even if you're on the tops and you're thinking, I'm very low down here at the front, I'm very canted over. That's not a comfortable place to be for just generally breathing. Which is kind of important.
It is. Breathing is an overlooked important attribute in cycling.
You see, and I think those are those are the extreme end, and I think that we're going to start bikes like the S5 and even the Y1 RS, as wacky as that back end looks. They are now slightly more sensible in terms of their geometry, and so we're starting to see them become just aero bikes that are a little bit more rideable, generally speaking. So we're going to see that aero and all-rounders going to be the same at some point.
Perhaps even proving the rule. Now that you've mentioned the Orbea Orca, I'm scrolling as we're chatting, and I'm like, I'd have that.
You'd have that.
I think that'd probably be one of the bikes I would have on top of my list in 2020.
Good value too.
Warren, back to you. On gravel bikes, it's been an absolutely massive year. Things have moved on quite significantly. We talked about this in the last podcast, but tech has come on leaps and bounds this year in terms of what's available, but also in terms of trends. Things are becoming a bit more refined, a bit more mature in the gravel bike space.
Yeah, we're seeing obviously the growth of gravel racing at the very highest level has seen bespoke bikes built for that, like proper pro race gravel bikes, and like the sort of early generations of those, they weren't just adapted road bikes. So it wasn't just like, well, we'll just take this super aggressive road bike and stick bigger tyres in it.
Or do you remember the Damani gravel? Who could forget?
Yes.
The one that Ben Delaney was pretty pouring scorn on.
Yeah, it's all that sort of thing. And now, there are purist bikes. So we've seen on that pro race side, aerodynamics being really properly considered. You take a bike like the Svello Aspero 5, or probably my favourite of that new generation of pro race aero-y gravel bike, the Villiers, the Rave SLR ID2. Just a fabulous looking machine, great ride, big tyres on it.
I think Villiers do the best paint.
Oh God, the one I had in that,
was it green or
vivid metallic green?
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
astonishingly good. Yeah. So, but then on the flip side of that, we're seeing this emergence of great all-rounder gravel bikes, not necessarily aimed at the kind of bikepacking crowd. That's where your all-rounder used to be. Well, it's an all-rounder, so we'll put every single fixture and fit in that we can think of on it.
Festooned with barnacles.
Yeah. And I always equated those sort of bikes with, like, it's the equivalent of buying a Range Rover. It's kind of, this could get me to Everest Base Camp. And it's like, yeah, but all you're ever going to do to it is drive onto a recreation ground and watch your kids play football. That's as off-road as you're going to go on that. So why have you bought that?
Yeah.
So having all these fixtures and fixtures you're never going to use is just, I'm carrying a load of extra mass that I don't need. So we've seen this emergence with a really good all-round gravel bike. I don't want to go coining another term, but I've sort of gone, it's the XC gravel bike. I don't need to go there.
Yeah.
It's a bit like last year. There was a really interesting trend from a few brands, the likes of Rondo and Nuke Proof, and going back before that, the Chamois Hagar, which was like, you've made a down country gravel bike. You made a gravel bike that's for going downhill on. And so we've seen all these, brands pushing these extremes, and now it's all converging back and just making these wonderfully capable, everywhere gravel bikes. They're light and agile enough to keep up on the road. They're more than fast enough to race. They're incredibly capable on a smooth gravel, but they're also just wicked fun to ride on single track and places where you probably go, you shouldn't take a gravel bike there. Well, that's when you need your mountain bike for that. And it's kind of there's been a couple in this year's test which you can read about on BikeRadar. Probably say particularly the Mondraker. My headline on the Mondraker was, "This is the gravel bike that makes me want to leave my mountain bike at home," because it was just so good at sort of natural techie single track trails. I mean, it's just an absolute blast to ride, and so I'm really excited about the gravel space right now, because it's like they've been casting the net out there and trying this, try that, and now it's all converging back down into two brilliantly distinct types, which are, if you want to race, you've got the most capable gravel bikes for racing that we've ever seen. If you want to just go out and blast around and have fun and push your limits, you've got the bike for that. And then still, we've got those old favourites of, like, if you want to basically pack your whole life up into a load of unfortunate bags and go and sleep in a ditch, you've got a bike for that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the gravel space is probably the most exciting space in drop bar bikes right now.
For sure. Something worth dwelling on with this is, like, the bikes themselves clearly have moved on quite significantly. But you had a really good anecdote in the previous podcast around the Cannondale Slate and its gearing that came on. Now that's a many generations ago of gravel bike, but it was essentially like semi-pro gearing on it. The components, the group sets, the finishing kit, like tires, wheels, all of that's been developed in tandem alongside the frame sets.
Absolutely.
And it actually makes it possible to build these really capable bikes without either fudging it, like nobody misses those old JTEC travel converters for actual usable gearing on a gravel bike, and tires to match as well, all intentions.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that's what we're really seeing now. I've had I know we've been talking recently about what gravel tires we would buy, and I've got old stalwart favourites, but there've been some new tires this year where they've taken because it used to be that gravel tyres, to me, always were like, well, let's just hit the middle ground. They need to be sturdy and strong enough if you're carrying 40 kilos of luggage. And they don't want to be too treaded because that would be slow on the road. So all gravel tyres were always sort of this halfway. They were neither fish nor fowl. They just weren't doing the job properly. But there have been a few this year. I've had a few sent to me over recent months I've been trying out, where they're using, the super soft, super sticky compounds from Pro mountain bike tyre tech, the casings are better, the casings are more supple. Their gravel tyres are now being taken seriously. So we have seen an emerging trend this year, especially with a lot of pro riders who are looking for bikes that have 55mm plus clearance because they want to use pro level mountain bike tyres because gravel tyres weren't good enough. I think maybe there's a few brands out there that have gone, right, yeah, we'll make you a bike that's got massive tyre clearances. I think maybe as these tyres are now maturing, we'll be able to settle back down into not effectively just making 29 mountain bikes with drop bars. We can actually bring it back to where gravel should be. Bikes exemplified like by the Mondraker Arid, by the Parley Taos, which bring all the things that were great about gravel, the lightness, the usability all over, but bring that mountain bike tech into the gravel space, not trying to appropriate existing mountain bike stuff. So I think there's, I'll talk more about those tyres once we'll give them more trying, but at the minute, I'm blown away by them. But I'm not going to let slip what they are because I'm not even sure they've officially launched yet. But
there we go. That's a really good segue, actually, to your point, Ash, where, even though this year's test, all of our testing covers a huge array of prices, we focus a great deal on the budget, but unsurprisingly, people like reading about expensive bikes too.
Yeah.
But even at the expensive end, your point about value and spec kind of still matters.
It does still matter. I often feel like we make this point quite a lot, but I think it's valid all the time, essentially, whereby, when you're buying a bike, especially at a higher price point, you have a so I think there's a right to expect that the spec is almost unimpeachable, basically. Like you buy it, you ride it out of the shop, figuratively speaking, and then you never want to have to upgrade it again. That's a reasonable expectation, especially with rising bike prices at £12,000 as this one has been. I think that's very reasonable. I think that at the other end of the spectrum, or in the mid-range spectrum, when we talk about the Boardman, for example, the SLR and the spec that's got on it as well, that's hardly upgradable as well for the money that you're spending.
That's the one thing with that bike is kind of, I over the years I've always sort of, had these kind of price point marks. It's kind of, and if you're getting above, it used to be a lot less, but post pandemic, post tariffs, post Brexit, it's obviously shifted a lot. But I think if I'm spending £5,000 or above, I don't want to have to change anything on that bike.
No,
Absolutely nothing. And if you're getting up into 9, 10 more, I want everything. Literally everything I'm ever going to need on that bike.
And that was one of your points on the Y1RS, where it was missing quite a key component in your view, and a fair view.
Yeah, I think so. If you like for that bike specifically, it was a power meter that it was missing for the money that you were spending, with £11,999.
Which is within £1 of the S5.
Exactly, and it's as I said when we previously talked about this in our previous podcast. That's an excellent bike. It rides beautifully. It's brilliant, super premium. But someone who's riding that bike should rightfully would expect to have a power meter on it. And even if we talk about the Synapse as well, with all the spec that comes with, and all the features that has too, like that's around £6,000 that bike.
This one it's 7, but
okay,
but the smart sense system,
but that's everything.
That's everything. Yeah, you buy that bike. What else do you need to get?
No, quite. And I think it matters wherever you're shopping. That value point still really matters as well. And I'm excited to see, because we haven't really covered them this year, because there hasn't really been that many outstanding value bikes this year. I would suggest at the lower price point range, yes, in the mid price point, which these all are. The Synapse and the kind of that spread in the mid price point, about 3 to 7, or these days. But I think at the lower price point, we've not seen that many £1,500, £2,000 bikes that are super, super great value.
Yeah,
there might be one or two, but not enough to make a competitive category this year. And I'm hoping next year that there would be.
It's a good point, actually, because then I think about it. Yeah, we have the Boardman. There was that Q's equipped Canyon. I think there's an Alley now that's Q's equipped. I don't know if it's available in the UK. There is definitely, a bit like the gravel bikes in their complete specs, Q's is giving them maybe a bit of refresh in that market, and also SRAM's cheaper electronic group sets being actually commendable.
It's a Q-shaped hole, isn't it? But we're still seeing bikes that are specced with Tiagra and
And I think the thing with that has been, we had this massive boom in bike sales during the pandemic, and that led to a saturation in the market, a massive overstocking. So none of the big guys are concentrating on that end of the market because there's so much old stock still out there. So there are plenty of bargains to be had at those price points, but there's just very little innovation. And unfortunately, we only deal with the new rather than the existing. I'm sure if we shopped around, you can find some significant bargains at the low end because there are so many bikes still out there.
I know this is like world's smallest violin stuff, but I'm totally separate to this, but writing a review of an Orbea hardtail, and it's like a really intriguing bike, and then it's bang in the mid-range. It's got some like quite unusual compromises. It's got some real big highlights. It's so much easier to write reviews about those bikes. Like a 12 grand one where you're like, well, yeah, it's pretty good.
Unsurprisingly.
Yeah. Like there's so much more to be said in that mid-range, and I think there's something to scratch there on budget bikes. You know, there could be a new, I don't know, generation of interesting budget bikes.
I mean, I did recently test some budget sub £2,000 gravel bikes, and was really, really impressed with them. Really impressed with them. And I've got a few more in the wings at the minute. A couple of them I'm quite excited about.
Right.
Maybe they'll make the 2026 cut.
Budget bike of the year, that would be a welcome return. Onto you again, you were saying that, you know, as race bikes have become more focused, you also feel that endurance bikes are doing the same thing.
Yes. Yeah, I think we've had a few fallow years for innovation around the endurance bike because lots of brands out there couldn't really see its place. We had lightweight race bikes, aero, gravel, and it's like, what are these? But what most of those big boys forgot is that's their biggest selling column. You know, you talk to any of the big, the top 5 brands in the world, what's your biggest selling model? And it'll be an endurance bike. They just don't shout about it.
Also, if you said to any new consumer, new being the key word there, and you said, you can have a race bike that's really fast, but it's actually quite uncomfortable and a bit like compromised, or you can have this one which is like almost as fast, it's really comfortable, and you can kind of do lots of stuff on it. They're going to go like, yeah, I'll have that one, please.
Yeah, exactly. And so we'd seen the endurance bike sort of be subsumed into this kind of all-road thing where they were kind of smashing in a bit of gravel, smashing in a bit of the kind of old school tourer, and all these things that kind of diluted what I think is a massively undervalued but really exciting genre of bike. And we saw it last year when Giant brought out the new Defy, which was just a phenomenal bike, super light, handled like a TCR, but was as comfortable as a couch, and just perfect. Just the perfect expression of a pure road bike, not built for racers. And this year we've seen a big explosion in that. Endurance bikes are in the perfect space to embrace the shift towards wider tyres. But the thing is that you get the more practical thing where you can get wider tyres, yet you can put mudguards on so you can ride the thing year round. This has got clearance for 42s. So you can run like a 38mm tyre with a full mudguard on this bike.
Be still my heart. Mudguard man over here.
And it just makes it's practical without being boring because this, bikes like this handle like a dream. Massive highlights this year. Cervelo's Evolution of the Caledonia, phenomenal bike. The Boardman we just talked about, insane good value. It takes more influence from race than it probably does from endurance, but it's got the comfort and the practicalities of an endurance bike. And then we've got the Synapse, which obviously is our bike of the year, which just encompasses all the good things about endurance, and then it draws its inspiration from racing. So it's got aero touches, it's got geometry that's more reflective of a race bike, but it's got the handling, the steering is fast without being twitchy. It just does everything right, and it's all focused on being a road bike. It's not being diluted by trying to do everything. It's like, let's just be good on the road but be comfortable with it.
I mean, it's a pure approach to designing a bike, and I can see why it's so popular. I used this anecdote in the last podcast, but there is a reason why. If you boil down behind the scenes on BikeRadar, all the various things we publish on site, endurance road bikes are the most popular. They just are.
Yeah.
Of course, there's like a bit of nuance within that, but anything we publish, specifically stuff from Woz as well, and sort of reflections and analysis on endurance bikes, it's still a massively popular category, and I think that return to the good old days of it will only be welcomed by.
Yeah, I mean, and it sort of predates the invention of the endurance bike as a term. If you go back to when I first started riding in the sort of last century,
in the black and white days.
The black and white days. Well, CRT TVs and 4 channels. But we had, in like the 80s, if you were riding the road, you had your race bike, normally something made of 531 competition tubing, super light, super stiff. But then you had your clubman. So you had your bike that was slightly more relaxed geometry, could take a little bit of a bigger tyre, could fit mud guards, and that was your training bike. And we've just coming back to that. But they were very closely associated. They were very similar. They weren't worlds apart, which is what the all-road thing tried to do. And I think, we need that. We need to be back at that,
Poor Woz, you said some really good bangers in these last 2 podcasts. We've got something on the Cannondale slate, budget bikes getting better, endurance bikes, the return to the Clubman days. You shouldn't have so many good ideas. They're going to be commissioned. It's been a really interesting bike of the year for all these reasons. Like, innovation never really slows down in cycling tech, but there's been some really cool talking points which have made this year's test a more worthwhile endeavor, but also our new refreshed approach to it. We're doing a less massive, all-encompassing, takes these boys out of their everything for months at a time to do something a bit more holistic, as Ash put it, and reflective of like where we've come to date rather than what's just launched necessarily. So I'd be keen to hear from you two, specifically you, Woz, given you've done quite a few Bike of the Years now. Like, how have you enjoyed putting together this year's test compared to others?
I guess it gives you sort of more time to think and more time to just, sort of dwell on things. And in the case of 2 of the bikes that are in my endurance category, I actually tested different models. And then on the Synapse side, it's like, I definitely want a cheaper one, not a £13,000 one. And on the Boardman side, they launched a special edition bike that just looked too good to be true. And I thought, well, I've got loads of experience on both those bikes. Let's re-experience them, see how they fare. So it's given us that, Not saying I don't miss the old days of, back in the 2010s when I was doing basically bike gear on my own.
Like genuinely like 30 bikes or something.
No, I mean, 2 years it was 50. But then I literally, have the 2 other guys on the road tech team farm all the work out to them and say, right, I'm leaving the office now. It's the start of October. I'll see you at the end of January. And then I literally go away and test 50 bikes back to back. And that's an incredible experience. You do learn a lot. You get very damp, you get very wet, you get very cold, but you learn a lot about it. But, I think there's definitely a balance to be had. And this, this year it's been having more time to think on everything rather than, right, I've done my 70 miles on that bike. Tomorrow I'm doing 70 miles on this bike and I'm going to think about those 2 and then whittling it down and down and down until,
I always remember with the mountain bikers when I first started here, I was like, I want to get involved with Bike of the Year. It looks really fun. Like, they're out riding all the time. And then, like, Tom Marvin would be so miserable by the end of December. Like, how many laps of Forsodine can you do?
I think it was, we had a particularly horrible winter. I can't remember what it was, probably 2016, 2017, something like that. And I did actually go to our publisher and say, can I claim for a new washing machine because mine's broke? Because I was getting through so much kit.
Happily, that wasn't a problem this year.
No. Yes, you were blessed with spring and summer.
And summer, exactly.
Ash, how about from your perspective? Obviously, you've done fewer Bike of the Years over the years, but, an interesting change of pace.
I think so. I've enjoyed... I to reflect Warren's point, I think I've enjoyed being able to consider what matters over the course of the year, because the story evolves over the year. It's not like you in previous years we might have done Bike of the Year and it's on the, as you say, on the latest bikes, and you're taking a snapshot there in time of what's available there and then, and then maybe a month or 2 later, it's kind of out of date. And that's, you could argue that's the case with a lot of tests that we run, because that's the way it has to be. But when you're able to take a period of time and look back a little bit while testing the bikes that make the most sense, I think it's more meaningful to me. And I think that means that our reflections, we're discussing some of the trends that we've noticed here. It's not a trend out of a snapshot of time. It's a trend that we've noticed growing over a period of time. It's a genuine trend, not really a piece of speculation that it might be a trend in the future. So I think that's the biggest win for doing it the way we've done it this year.
Putting speculation front and center, though, we do change the kind of shape of the test year to year. Like, we didn't run Gravel Bike of the Year a few years back. That will always remain a firm fixture. I'm pretty confident. Endurance bikes, maybe next year, maybe not. It kind of depends. So I'm going to put it to both of you. What's your guess for next year was? What are going to be the categories? What do you think's emerging over the horizon in terms of key areas?
There's a lot more new and interesting gravel coming, definitely. There's a few super key endurance bikes which are definitely due an update. We're going to see more convergence on the road race aero coming together, with more emphasis on aero than on the lightweight. So I think it's going to be a really interesting time. And I think now we're far enough down the line from the sort of cataclysmic effects that have happened to the bike industry. I think it's going to be an exciting time for lower price bikes next year as well. I've had a few conversations over the last couple of weeks with a few of the bigger brands who are talking about next year's product, and a few of them are sort of going, we're hitting it on price next year. It's all about price next year. And it's like from some of the really big boys, they're sort of going, I want to come and see you in the next few weeks because I want to show you literally our price list because you're not going to believe it. And so I think budget might be a big consideration for next year.
To which you said to them, yes, you could just send me that price list in an email and then I could see it that way.
Yeah, but they always want to pitch and sell you them.
Of course they do. Of course they do.
What do you reckon, Ash?
The biggest thing for me would be cheaper bikes and budget bikes. I think that's the thing. I don't see us necessarily changing at this point. Looking outwards, I don't see us changing these categories necessarily, but maybe the addition of a more budget-oriented category. And actually, it'd be great to, our readers, if you want to leave comments in the section below around.
Beat me to it.
Yeah, if you want to leave us some comments, just let us know. What kind of budget are you looking at, and we'll take all flavors on that, but. Maybe that'll help us guide the kinds of bikes that we'll test going forward in the months to come, and then for 2026 maybe we'll have a bike of the year category on a more budget oriented category, which I'd like to see personally.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah, I like always. We're really keen to hear what you thought of this year's bike of the year test. It is very different. But it's been really valuable, and we've really enjoyed putting it together. Well, they've really enjoyed putting it together. I've just merely sat on the sidelines. Thank you again to Autotrail for sponsoring Bike of the Year. Wouldn't have been possible without them. It's been a really good test, and I'm sure you're looking forward to moving on to the next thing. But thank you both to Ash and Woz. You've been really good.
Thank you.
We'll speak to you again soon.